Carl Jung believed that archetypes are ancient forces engraved in the collective unconscious that shape the way we perceive, desire, and relate. They are not disguises one can don at will, nor simple cultural stereotypes. They are universal patterns that have existed in all civilizations, narrated in myths, legends, and dreams. They represent figures that touch deep fibers of the human psyche: the protective mother, the inspiring muse, the mysterious enchantress, the sovereign queen. These archetypes live within us, beyond our conscious awareness, and are activated when we encounter someone who authentically embodies them. In this context, some women possess a magnetism that cannot be explained with superficial reasons. It's not just their beauty, their style, or their intelligence. It's something deeper, something a man feels in his body before he can put it into words. She awakens in him an ancient, almost ancestral emotion, as if he's known her before, in another time or another place. They may never have exchanged words, but her presence triggers in him a silent recognition. She embodies something my soul seeks. This invisible magnetism doesn't depend on conscious effort. In fact, many of these women aren't even fully aware of the archetypal force they convey. They don't follow a seduction manual or act to impress. They simply live in such alignment with a certain energy that it projects naturally. It's the coherence between who they are, what they feel, and what they do that generates that hypnotic impact. When a man comes into contact with a living archetype, his psyche reacts as if an internal echo has been ignited. This isn't a rational choice, it's an instinctive impulse. His attention is fixed, his imagination is ignited, and his memory stores every gesture. Because to his subconscious, this woman isn't just someone attractive, but a living symbol of something he's always sought: protection, mystery, inspiration, or challenge. Understanding. This principle means understanding that true magnetism isn't created by techniques, but by presence and authenticity. Embodying an archetype isn't about acting a role, but rather allowing a deep part of your essence to express itself without fear. That's where unforgettable attraction is born. Superficial attraction is like a spark, intense, bright, but fleeting. It arises when something in appearance, body language, or immediate chemistry momentarily sparks interest. It may be due to facial, symmetry, a way of dressing, a witty conversation, or a seductive gesture. However, like any spark, it fizzles out if there's no deeper fuel to fuel it. Attraction based solely on physicality or aesthetics depends on external stimuli that, over time, lose intensity. All it takes is for the novelty to wear off or for circumstances to change for interest to begin to fade. Soul resonance, on the other hand, is of a different nature. It originates not in sight, but in the unconscious. It occurs when a person embodies an archetype that awakens memories, emotions, and desires that have lain dormant in the psyche. This type of connection doesn't require physical perfection or impeccable staging because it's anchored in something much deeper, a sense of familiarity and meaning. It's as if, without knowing why, you sense that this person holds a key to open a door that has always been within you. Carl Jung explained that these encounters are not mere coincidences, but symbolic activations. When the soul recognizes in the other an archetype it carries within, an invisible bridge is established. From that moment on, the relationship ceases to be merely an interaction between two personalities and becomes a stage where internal forces, desires, fears, ideals come into play. Therefore, the resonance of the soul does not fade easily. Even at a distance, the memory of that person remains alive and charged with meaning. The transformative thing about resonance is that when you connect with someone in this way, you don't just feel attraction, you feel a surge of growth. That person acts as a mirror, reflecting parts of you that were hidden, challenging you to evolve, inspiring you to transcend your own limitations. While superficial attraction fades away with repetition, Soul resonance expands over time because it doesn't depend on what is seen, but on what is awakened. That's the key. What seduces the eye may appeal to the body, but what touches the soul transforms your whole life. Carl Jung believed that archetypes are primordial images that reside in the collective unconscious and that each one evokes a distinct emotional reaction in us. In the case of attraction between a man and a woman, certain feminine archetypes trigger responses so profound that they can't always explain them in words. Recognizing which of these archetypes you embody, or which resonates most with that man's psyche, is key to understanding your unique magnetism. The Muse, she is the archetype that inspires creation, vision, and purpose. Her presence awakens in man the need to surpass himself, to express himself, and to build something greater than himself. It's not just admiration, it's a creative impulse born from feeling her energy. The man who crosses paths with a muse doesn't just want to conquer her, he wants to be worthy of her. The warrior, she evokes strength, independence, and determination. Her energy inspires respect and provokes an inner challenge. The man feels he must match her courage to be at her level. The warrior doesn't need saving, and that's precisely why she inspires those around her to grow stronger. The protective mother, it embodies nurturing, warmth, and emotional security. In a man, this archetype triggers deep memories of protection and unconditional acceptance. It's not about dependency, but rather the feeling of having found a safe place where he can be vulnerable without judgment. The sorceress, it awakens fascination and mystery. Its allure isn't obvious or logical. It's a force that captivates and disconcerts at the same time. In humans, this archetype triggers the desire to discover the hidden, to explore emotional and spiritual territories they've never explored before. Each of these archetypes speaks a different language in the male unconscious. The muse inspires, the warrior challenges, the protective mother welcomes, the enchantress intrigues. And it's important to understand that there is no better archetype than another. It all depends on the wounds, aspirations, and latent desires of the man you interact with. Identifying the archetype that resonates most in their unconscious isn't about manipulation, but about understanding the nature of that connection. Because when you know what part of their soul you've touched, you also understand the role you're playing in their story. That's where true influence begins. Faking an archetype is like using expensive perfume on skin that doesn't absorb it. At first, it can be deceiving, but sooner or later, the fragrance fades and leaves an artificial trail. In the realm of deep connections, imitation not only fails, but also provokes instinctive rejection. The human unconscious, that Carl Jung described as sensitive to symbols and patterns, easily detects inconsistencies. The other person may not be able to explain why, but something doesn't add up, and that feeling erodes attraction. The problem with pretending is that it requires constant energy to maintain the mask. Adopting the tone of voice, gestures, or attitudes of an archetype that doesn't naturally belong to you creates internal tension, and that tension seeps in a look that doesn't match the words, in a gesture that betrays the role, in a pause that breaks the spell. When image and essence are not aligned, the result is superficiality. Embodying an archetype, on the other hand, doesn't involve acting, but rather living from a center of coherence. It means recognizing which energy authentically resonates with you, whether it's the warmth of the protective mother, the intensity of the enchantress, or the determination of the warrior, and allowing it to express itself organically. This isn't achieved by imitating other people's behaviors, but by cultivating habits, thoughts, and emotions that strengthen that core. The alignment between actions, body language, and energy is what makes an archetype magnetic. It's not just what you say, but how you say it. It's not just your posture, but the intention behind it. A woman who embodies her archetype doesn't need to over-explain herself. Her way of looking, moving, and deciding communicates more than any speech. Jung pointed out that authenticity has an unconscious symbolic power. When someone acts from their truth, they become a living symbol that inspires, challenges, or moves. And this isn't created overnight. It's built through self-observation, acceptance of one's own shadow, and daily consistency. Ultimately, the real appeal isn't in adopting a perfect role, but in being so congruent with your essence that the other person feels they can't find that combination anywhere else. Because an embodied archetype isn't interpreted, it's breathed. Before you even open your mouth, your presence has already spoken. Carl Jung maintained that the human unconscious responds first to symbols and patterns, and only later to logic or verbal content. This means that within the first seconds of an encounter, a person has already perceived something about you that comes not from your words, but from your energy. This energy is transmitted through nonverbal signals that, in subtle but powerful ways, awaken archetypal associations in their mind. Your body, your gestures, your posture, your gaze, even the rhythm of your breathing carry meaning. A warrior can walk into a room without saying a word and still convey strength and purpose through the way she holds her head or how she occupies the space. A muse, on the other hand, might radiate softness and openness with a slight tilt of the face, prolonged eye contact, and a smile that invites connection. These micro-comportamientos, so small that sometimes you're not even aware of them, immediately reinforce an archetype. A slow, deliberate turn of the head can intensify the mystery of an enchantress. A light touch on the arm during a conversation can evoke the protective warmth of the mother. A genuine, free laugh can project the luminous inspiration of a muse. The interesting thing is that these signals cannot be successfully faked over the long term, because the unconscious detects the difference between a learned gesture and one born from a real, internal state. If you try to imitate the serenity of the protective mother without feeling truly calm, your gaze or tone of voice will reveal tension. Body language doesn't lie, and others perceive it even unintentionally. Therefore, connecting with your archetype isn't a matter of practicing postures in front of a mirror, but rather aligning your emotional and mental state with the energy you wish to project. When your inner world is coherent, every movement becomes congruent and magnetic. In the end, people first perceive what you radiate and only then listen to what you say. And if your energy has already activated a symbol in them that their unconscious recognizes, your words will only reinforce what their soul already felt from the very beginning. In Carl Jung's view, no authentic archetype is a flawless figure free of contradictions. Every powerful symbol integrates light and shadow, virtues that inspire and flaws that humanize. Trying to embody an archetype only from its right side creates an unreal, almost plastic image, which may impress at first, but sooner or later feels empty. What truly connects and magnetizes is the consistency of showing both sides of the coin, without disguising imperfections. The light of an archetype represents its most admired qualities. The tenderness of the protective mother, the determination of the warrior, the mystery of the enchantress, the inspiration of the muse. But the shadow is also present, the overprotection that suffocates, the rigidity that closes off possibilities, the secrecy that isolates, the vanity that seeks constant validation. Integrating both parts doesn't mean glorifying flaws, but rather recognizing them, understanding their origin, and learning to manage them. When a woman accepts her shadow, she transmits a different energy, real trust. She no longer needs to hide her flaws or maintain a perfect image. This, paradoxically, makes her more attractive, because her presence feels honest and approachable. The man realizes he's not standing before an untouchable marble statue, but before a human being with whom he can have a genuine, unmasked connection. Furthermore, the well-integrated shadow adds depth to the archetype. The tenderness of the protecting mother gains strength when it comes from someone who knows pain and loss. The mystery of the Enchantress intensifies when one understands that her reserve is born from experiences that shaped her. The inspiration of the Muse becomes more powerful when one knows that she, too, has experienced doubts and fears. This blend of light and shadow generates a magnetism that is neither naive nor fragile, but solid and real. Integration also awakens something essential: permission for the other to be themselves. When you show that you're not perfect but still valuable and secure, you give the other person space to lower their own defenses. This emotional openness creates stronger bonds than any idealization. Ultimately, what makes an archetype compelling isn't its perfection, but its humanity. Light inspires, but it's the accepted shadow that invites you to linger. The narrative you tell about yourself is one of the most powerful channels for conveying your archetype without even mentioning it. Carl Jung explained that the unconscious communicates through symbols and stories, and our personal stories function as those living symbols. It's not just about what you say, but about the images, emotions, and values your language evokes in the minds of others. When you share an anecdote, you're not just recounting facts. You're revealing how you interpret life, what you prioritize, and what drives you. A muse, for example, might talk about a trip and focus on the beauty of the landscape, the inspiration she felt, and how that led her to write, paint, or create. A warrior, on the other hand, might recount the same experience, highlighting the challenges, the firm decisions, and the determination to overcome obstacles. Even seemingly simple details can reinforce an archetype. Phrases like, "I always look for the bright side, even on gray days," Musa. "I won't give up until I find a solution," Guerrera. "I like people to feel safe around me," Protective Mother. "I prefer that they find out what I think. I don't usually say everything," Witch. Tone is also key. The muse often speaks with metaphors and a slow pace that conveys contemplation. The warrior uses direct language, full of action verbs. The protective mother chooses words that convey warmth and closeness, while the enchantress introduces strategic pauses and silences that spark curiosity. The important thing is that these narratives emerge from real experiences and authentic values, because the other person's subconscious senses coherence. If you make up a story to impress, your body language or lack of genuine emotion is likely to give it away. On the other hand, when your story is born from something experienced, every gesture, intonation, and look reinforces the image you project. Through your stories, others begin to form an emotional map of who you are, and that map is far more influential than any list of qualities you could enumerate. Telling your life story from your archetype isn't an act of manipulation, but of conscious authenticity, showing your essence in such a natural way that, without naming it, the person in front of you recognizes and feels it. One of the most common mistakes is believing that, to be magnetic, you must attract everyone. In reality, a powerful archetype doesn't seek mass approval. It acts as a natural filter that selects people truly aligned with your energy. Carl Jung emphasized that symbols, and archetypes are symbols, arouse different reactions depending on the psyche that receives them. What fascinates some may provoke indifference or even discomfort in others, and that's not a flaw, it's a protection. When you authentically embody your archetype, not all men will resonate with you, and that's precisely what preserves your energy. The muse, for example, can deeply inspire those who seek beauty and creativity in their lives, but may be too ethereal for a man who prioritizes the practical and the immediate. The warrior will attract those who admire independence and strength, but will intimidate those who prefer more submissive relationships. The enchantress will spark curiosity in men who love mystery, but will frustrate those who desire absolute control. This filter isn't a wall that isolates you, but rather an unconscious affinity system. Without you having to consciously evaluate it, your energy communicates who you are, and only those who share or seek that frequency will stay close. This not only protects your time, but also prevents you from diluting your essence by trying to fit in with everyone. Accepting that not everyone will resonate with you is liberating. It takes the pressure off you to please and allows you to focus on cultivating relationships where your archetype can fully unfold, without censorship or forced adjustment. Furthermore, those who do resonate with you will do so in a deeper way, because they will feel they have discovered something rare and valuable, something not offered to everyone. This process also preserves your authenticity. If you try to modify your archetype to attract more people, you end up sending mixed signals that confuse both yourself and others. On the other hand, by staying true to your energy, you project a coherence that needs no justification and, paradoxically, increases your magnetism. In short, an authentic archetype isn't measured by the number of eyeballs it attracts, but by the quality of the connections it generates. And truly transformative connections never come from pleasing everyone, but from resonating intensely with a few. When you authentically embody an archetype, you don't just provoke attraction. You act as a mirror that reflects hidden aspects of a man's unconscious. Carl Jung explained that we tend to project onto others the parts of ourselves we don't recognize or have repressed. So, when a man encounters a woman who embodies a powerful archetype, what truly impacts him is not just her, but the part of himself she awakens. The Muse, for example, can rekindle a creativity that he left dormant for years, reminding him of dreams and passions that he abandoned due to daily obligations. Warrior can activate your desire for courage, prompting you to face challenges you have avoided. Protective Mother can reconnect your need for care and acceptance, something you may not have allowed yourself to ask for. And the Sorceress, it can confront you with your deepest desires and your curiosity about the unknown, pushing you to explore emotional territories you were afraid of. This reflection isn't always comfortable. In fact, sometimes the impact is so strong that it generates resistance or even initial rejection, because it shows you a part of yourself you haven't learned to accept. However, if you're willing to confront this projection, the encounter with your archetype can become a catalyst for personal growth. Psychologically, seeing yourself reflected in them offers them two options: ignore what you awaken and continue as before, or embrace that impulse and evolve. In this sense, your presence can be a turning point in their life. Not because you tell them what to do, but because your very existence reminds them of what they could be if they dared to integrate that dormant part. The true power of an archetype isn't in impressing, but in inspiring transformation. When a man feels that your energy invites him to grow, that your way of living embodies qualities he yearns for, a connection is formed that transcends the physical. And, although he can't always explain it in words, his subconscious recognizes it. She is the mirror that shows me what I can become. Ultimately, that is the deepest magnetism. Not just attracting, but awakening. Turning an archetype into a lifestyle means stopping seeing it as a one-time strategy for attraction and starting to experience it as a constant expression of your essence. Carl Jung argued that archetypes aren't simple masks, but living energies that, when integrated, shape our decisions, habits, and relationships. If you only activate your archetype at certain times, on a date, on social media, or in specific interactions, its impact will be limited and superficial. But if you embody it consistently, it becomes a magnetic force felt in everything you do. When your archetype guides the way you work, dress, relate to friends, face challenges, and take care of yourself, you project a coherence that leaves a mark. Muse that inspires does so not only with one man, but with all those around her. She transforms environments, proposes ideas, opens perspectives. Warrior. She's not just brave when someone looks at her. Her discipline and determination are evident in how she takes care of her body, how she faces crises, and how she pursues her goals. Protective Mother offers its warmth in any context and the sorceress maintains its aura of mystery even in the simplest routines. Living your archetype in all areas of your life creates a profound impact because it doesn't depend on the presence or absence of a specific person. Even if a relationship doesn't prosper, the mark you leave lives on in the other person's memory. You've touched a place in their soul that can't be erased because what they experienced with you wasn't a one-off act, but an immersion in authentic energy. This approach also protects you from falling into a dependency on acting to attract. When your archetype is part of your daily life, you no longer need to turn it on to impress. It's always present. This frees up your energy and allows you to connect from a place of calm and security, without the anxiety of maintaining an image. In the end, turning your archetype into a lifestyle isn't a seduction technique, but an act of fidelity to yourself. And that fidelity, that absolute congruence between who you are and how you live, is what makes you unforgettable. Because we don't remember the person who played a role, but the person who embodied their truth.